Blood dripped from Major Alexis Carter's lip as racist officer Derek Cole slammed the cuffs on her in front of her own neighbors. 20 years of service, and this was the welcome home she got. But just 30 minutes later, FBI agents stormed the station and nothing in Brookhaven would ever be the same again. How did a decorated black veteran's arrest turn into the downfall of an entire police department? If this story stirs your sense of justice, hit the like button and share it with others. Now, let's dive into the full story. I've lived on Sycamore Street long enough to know when a morning looks honest and when it's pretending. That day in Brookhaven was pretending, sunlight neat as a postcard, porches swept. But the old houses I grew up beside had turned into boutiques with names I couldn't pronounce. A silver rental eased up to Evelyn Carter's place, and I knew before the door opened who it was. Major Alexis Carter, back at 38, the little girl who used to race her bike down this block and salute my husband for fun. She didn't hop out the way kids do. She sat a second with the engine ticking, checked her mirror, and I caught the look you only see on people who've seen too much tired eyes that keep scanning even when the fight is over. There was a thin scar along her cheek that I don't remember from before. Her hands, when she finally cut the engine, rested on the wheel like she was waiting for someone to give a command she couldn't hear. Then the front door creaked, and Evelyn stepped onto the porch, small and proud in that old blue sweater. The flag over her swung lazily. She never took it down, not once, not through the years of deployments and holidays with an empty chair. Alexis didn't say anything at first. She just climbed the steps and let her mother fold her up. It wasn't dramatic. No wailing, no collapse. Just two women holding on a second longer than normal, breathing like they'd been underwater and finally reached air. "I told you I'd come home," Alexis said quiet, and you could hear 20 years in the way Evelyn laughed. Brookhaven tries to look the same when somebody comes home, but it never does. I saw Alexis notice it in pieces. The Lawson place, now a candle shop. Mr. Chu's Market, a cold brew cafe. The barber pole gone, replaced with a chalkboard sign about imported beans. She loaded one box at a time from the trunk, eyes drifting up and down the street between trips, clocking shadows, taking inventory the way soldiers do. It wasn't suspicion so much as habit corners, sightlines, who's watching. You don't lose that. Evelyn fussed like mothers do, offering water, then sweet tea, then saying the sweet tea needs more sugar and making it again. Alexis smiled in that polite way children use when they know the performance matters more than the taste. "Sit," Evelyn said. "You're home." She tapped the arm of the porch chair like it was an order. Alexis sat, put her bag down, and I swear I could see her shoulders drop an inch. From the sidewalk, I called over just to say, "Welcome back," and Alexis stood to hug me like there hadn't been a dozen Christmases since I'd seen her last. She asked about my knees. I asked about her mother. We talked like neighbors, which is to say we didn't say very much at all, and meant the rest between the lines. Up close, the years were clearer, fine cracks at the corner of her eyes, the way she listened, before she answered the stillness in her when a truck down the block popped its tailgate. 3 tours, Evelyn told me later, the way some folks say 3 winters. 20 years in uniform. She said it with pride, then pinched her lips, like pride is a spice you shouldn't use too much. Alexis didn't elaborate. She just watched the flag like it was speaking, and she was trying to hear the words. Around mid-morning, after the boxes were stacked in the hallway and the kettle had whistled twice, Alexis took the keys again. "I'll make a loop," she told Evelyn. "See what's changed." Evelyn waved her off with a dish towel, the way mothers wave off worry. I watched the rental crawl past the new cafe. A young couple at the window glanced up at her and went back to their phones. She slowed at our old church, now event space, and for a second I thought she might pull in. She didn't. She drove on, face soft and puzzled, like she was walking through a house someone rearranged while she was gone. That's the thing about coming home, you expect the bones to be the same. The bones weren't. The corner where kids used to trade baseball cards had a mural and a QR code. The supermarket you could find blindfolded had moved 3 blocks east. Even the wind sounded different, trimmed by new glass and new rules. Alexis kept her window half down. I could tell she was chasing the smell of cut grass and charcoal and Sunday, but it kept slipping behind roasted coffee and eucalyptus candles. When she came back, Evelyn had set 2 glasses and a plate of biscuits on the porch table like a peace offering. They didn't talk big. They talked small, the doctor's appointments, the creak in the step, the neighbor who moved to Florida, and the one who came back from Tennessee. The small talk is how you put the world back together without admitting it broke. Every now and then, Alexis would glance at the street. Not jumpy, just aware. You can take a woman out of the war. You don't take the war out of the woman. I asked if she was home for good, and she gave me the kind of answer people give when they don't trust time yet. For now, she said and sipped her tea. Mom needs me. Evelyn cut her a look that said needing and wanting are cousins, and both of them nodded like they'd rehearsed it. Across the way, a cruiser rolled slow past the stop sign. It didn't stop long enough to be polite, just long enough to be noticed. Alexis's eyes tracked it without moving her head. Old reflex. The car kept going and the street went back to sun and gossip and the click of a flag rope against a pole. If you'd asked me right then, I would have said the day would stay quiet, some laundry, a sandwich, a nap in the cool room with the fan. That's what homecoming days are supposed to be. But there was a weight to the air I couldn't place, the kind that makes you speak softer without knowing why. Alexis leaned back, closed her eyes for the first time since she parked, and exhaled like she was trying to let something go. You're safe, Evelyn told her and patted her hand. Alexis nodded. She wanted to believe it. We all did. I only meant to grab milk and aspirin. That's why I was out on Pine, 2 blocks from the Carter place, when I saw the silver rental roll past the hardware store with a cruiser tucked in tight behind it. Not a casual follow. Nose to bumper through one light, then another like the officer was reading her license plate for sport. Alexis checked her mirror, twice small movement, steady shoulders. That's when I knew she'd seen him the first block and started thinking like a soldier again. We hit the next intersection together. The cruiser flicked its lights blue and red, slicing up the clean morning. Alexis eased to the curb the way you'd teach it in a driver's ed class. Signal slow wheels, straight hands at 10 and 2. I pulled over half a car length back. It was quiet enough on Pine that you could hear a screen door slap shut and a dog collar jingle. I cut my engine and kept my window down. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but you don't turn away when someone you love is alone with power. He got out like he owned the block. 40s pale as copier paper under the Georgia sun jaw clenched hard. Officer Derek Cole, the nameplate said, though he wore the look of a man who figured names were for other people. He came up on Alexis's window, slow hand resting on his holster, eyes already set to dislike. Behind him, the passenger door opened and a second officer climbed out. Thin kid couldn't be more than 25. Officer Ryan Miller. He kept to the rear quarter panel where rookies stand when they're learning the choreography and trying not to make a mistake. License and registration. Cole's voice could have cut wire. No good morning, no reason for the stop. Alexis kept her hands where he could see them. My wallet is in my bag on the passenger seat, she said, calm like you'd speak to a skittish horse. May I reach for it? He didn't nod. He just watched her. She moved slow, one motion, no surprises. She passed him her driver's license, the rental agreement, and because that's who she is, her military ID. The corner of his mouth twitched, not impressed, not grateful. He glanced at the ID long enough to recognize it, and then held it like it smelled wrong. People like you always cause trouble, he said, soft enough to pass for a private comment, loud enough that I heard it from my car. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way he filed her in his head and shut the drawer. The kid Miller shifted his weight. His eyes went to Alexis's hands, then to Cole's face, then down the street like he was checking for witnesses. He was learning fast. There were always witnesses, even when you wish there weren't. What's the reason for the stop, officer? Alexis asked. Voice steady, not sugar, not fire. She knew better than to give either. Cole flicked his chin toward the back of the car. Broken tail light. It wasn't. I'd been behind her from Sycamore to Pine. Both lenses were whole and shining. Alexis knew it too. I saw her look in the rear view quick, as if confirmation could change the moment. It couldn't. It's a rental, she said. Picked up this morning. Everything should be in working order. Should be, he repeated like he was tasting the words for weakness. He handed back nothing. He held every card she'd given him like leverage. Step out of the vehicle. Even from where I sat, I felt my chest pull tight. This was where simple stops grew teeth. Alexis swallowed once, then did what they teach service members. When they come home, survive the moment. She put the car in park, turned off the engine, placed the keys on the dash where he could see them. Hands back to the wheel. I'm going to unbuckle my seatbelt, she said. Then I'll exit. Cole didn't answer. He stepped back 2 inches so his body camera, if it was on, wouldn't catch his eyes. Miller watched her buckle with a face that said he wanted to say something and had learned not to. The kid's fingers worried at the edge of his duty belt. He kept glancing at Cole like a dog that knows when a hand will pet and when it will strike and isn't sure which is coming. Alexis opened the door and swung her legs out slow and careful. She stood palms open at her sides, posture straight. That was the soldier in her. Even on a sidewalk with a man looking at her like a problem, she could not help but stand like she had a standard to meet. "Turn around," Cole said. "For what purpose?" Alexis asked. Still calm. "Am I being detained?" "You're being instructed," he said, and there was the contempt again curling off the word like smoke. "Turn around." I wanted to climb out of my car and turn the whole day around myself. Instead, I watched the way neighbors watch the way you memorize. So if anyone ever asks you what happened, you can say it true. A woman with a stroller slowed. An older man stopped his bike and set a sneaker on the curb. Nobody reached for a phone yet. Phones come out when the shouting starts. We were still in the quiet part, the part where you pray the quiet holes. Alexis didn't argue. She pivoted, kept her hands where he could see them. "Officer," she said, "my mother lives 2 blocks from here." "I'm just broken tail light," he cut in. "Hands on the roof." Miller stepped forward a half pace. "Sarge," he said, then caught himself. Cole didn't look back. He just tilted his head, and the kid froze like a command had passed between them that I couldn't hear. Alexis put her palms on the cool metal. She spread her feet the way they tell you. She was dignified even then. That was the part that made my throat burn, the dignity of someone who has already paid paying again. Cole moved down the checklist pockets, waistband, ankles. It wasn't a search so much as a lesson about who was running this block. He didn't find anything. Of course he didn't. He stood back like the absence of trouble offended him. "Sit tight," he said, and walked to the rear of the car to inspect a tail light that wasn't broken. Miller lingered. He looked at Alexis like a student looks at a chalkboard full of answers that don't add up. His voice, when it finally came, was small. "Ma'am, keep your hands where he can see them," he said, like the words were both warning and apology. A breeze moved down pine and rattled the leaves. Somewhere a bell on a shop door chimed. I could feel the street holding its breath. Alexis lifted her eyes just enough to see the sky. She didn't say a thing. She didn't have to. You could read the question in the set of her jaw. How much more do I have to give to be left alone on a Tuesday in the town that raised me? Cole slapped the trunk with his palm like a gavel. Decision made. He radioed something I couldn't catch and walked back with his shoulders squared for trouble. That was the moment I reached for my phone. Not to call, not yet. Just to be ready in case the quiet finally broke. Cole came back from the trunk with a look that said the verdict was already written. "Hands behind your back," he snapped. Alexis didn't flinch. She lifted her palms off the roof, slow, a measured breath between each move. "Officer," she said, "I'm cooperating." "Hands." He seized her right wrist and wrenched it high enough to make my own shoulder ache. The other hand followed. The cuffs clicked too tight, that angry little ratchet. That means this isn't about safety anymore. She swallowed it. Shoulders squared. Chin level. A soldier remembering how to stand when standing is all you have left. Traffic on Pine thinned to a hush. A delivery van idled, blinkers ticking like a metronome. 2 teenagers stopped on their scooters. The woman with the stroller turned around and rolled back. Phones came out, the flicker of a camera app, the arm held high, the way people lean in without moving their feet. Nobody spoke yet. We were still measuring how bad this would get. "Step toward me," Cole ordered, already tugging. He wasn't guiding, he was displaying. He turned her to face the street cuffs gleaming in the morning light, as if humiliation were part of the procedure. Alexis's jaw worked once, then stilled. She looked past him over his shoulder like she was finding a steady point on the horizon. I heard a small, stunned voice from behind me. No, that can't be." Patricia Henson, who's seen every parade and funeral this town can throw, stood with one hand on her chest and the other clutching her purse like it might keep the day from falling apart. "Not our Alexis," she whispered, as if saying it soft could make it untrue. Cole leaned in mouth almost at Alexis's ear. He spoke low, the way men do when they want to be cruel in private, but make sure you still hear. "In the army, maybe you were a hero. Here you're just a criminal." Alexis didn't give him her eyes. She breathed in out, and when she spoke, it carried just enough to reach the curb. 20 years of service, she said, and this is my welcome home. Something moved in the crowd, anger, grief, recognition. Phones rose higher. The delivery driver cut his engine. Even the wind seemed to wait. Behind Cole, the rookie shifted again. Officer Ryan Miller had his hands clamped on his duty belt, like he was keeping himself from leaping forward. His gaze kept bouncing Alexis's wrists, Cole's shoulder, the row of porches where witnesses were piling up. His mouth open closed. I saw the word Sarge form and die on his tongue. He squeezed his fingers so hard the leather creaked. Cole started a pat down with the same coiled contempt he'd had since the first word. Spread your feet. He kicked at her shoe to move it an inch unnecessary and pointed. He ran his hands along seams swift and rough. Found nothing, of course. People like Alexis don't keep trouble in their pockets. Trouble finds them and calls it procedure. Turn. He pivoted her toward the hood of his cruiser like she was evidence to be displayed. Across the street, someone finally spoke up, an older man on a bike. Hey, officer, he called. Voice careful, she didn't do anything. He didn't put force behind it. He just offered the truth as if truth might be accepted like identification. Cole didn't bother to look. He kept his eyes on Alexis, on the control he was enjoying, on the story he believed about who belonged on this street and who didn't. Back it up, he barked, and the man did, because that's what you do when a command meets a badge. Miller took a half step closer. Sir, he tried again, barely above a whisper camera. He flicked his eyes toward Cole's chest where a square of black plastic sat too still, too dark. Cole's jaw bunched. His hand brushed the housing like a man swatting a fly. The rookie froze, understanding exactly how much room he had to move in. Alexis turned her head enough to find me. Not for help, she knows better than to bargain with moments like this. It was more like she was making a record, witnesses' faces the shape of a town she loved turning away from her, and then one by one turning back. A siren whooped once, short and sharp, from somewhere farther down Pine. Not an emergency, just punctuation. On the porch, Evelyn wasn't there, thank God. If she had been, I don't know how she would have kept from throwing herself down the steps. Patricia stepped closer to me and whispered, say something. My mouth worked and found nothing that wouldn't make it worse. Cole pulled her forward toward the back seat of his cruiser. You're under arrest, he said. For what Alexis asked. No edge, no tremor, just the question every citizen is allowed to ask. He let the silence do the intimidation before he answered. Obstruction, non-compliance. We'll figure it out at the station. Phones caught that. I saw 3 heads tilt at the same time as if a cord had gone sour. The woman with the stroller finally raised her voice. She asked permission to move her hands. I heard her. It came out thin, but it came out. Cole ignored her. He opened the rear door with a flourish and ducked Alexis's head with a little more force than needed. She folded herself in like a person who's practiced patience more than freedom. The door thumped shut. The sound ran down the block like a shiver. Miller stood at the edge of the curb staring at the asphalt. He looked sick. He looked 25. When he finally lifted his gaze, it landed on me, and for a second he seemed to ask without words if we were seeing what he was seeing. I nodded because sometimes that's the only lifeline you can throw. Cole circled the cruiser once satisfied, then turned to the crowd. Show's over, he said. Clear of the sidewalk line. No one moved. Not yet. We weren't brave, not really. We were just rooted in the wrongness of it, the way trees hold even when the wind tries to persuade them. I heard a voice behind me, maybe my own, maybe someone else's, say, we're watching. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Cole slid into the driver's seat. Miller hesitated, glanced at Alexis through the glass, then climbed in on the passenger side. The light bar bloomed blue and red again, washing the storefronts in emergency. The cruiser pulled away slow, like it wanted to savor the quiet it had made. When it turned off Pine, the morning noise crept back by degrees, the van restarting the stroller's wheels, squeaking the murmur of people trying to name what they just saw. Patricia touched my arm. Tell me this isn't who we are, she said. I didn't answer. I watched the taillights, perfect, unbroken, disappear towards Sycamore and felt the whole street shift like a door had closed on the town we thought we lived in. They brought her through the side door, the one they use when they don't want the public watching. I followed as far as the glass would let me, but inside was another world, fluorescent lights, humming walls the color of old paper, the kind of air that makes your shoulders sag. Cole walked her straight to the desk and dumped her paperwork like it was trash. Name, he asked, though he already had her ID in his hand. Alexis answered, steady, giving her rank out of habit. That's when he smirked. He held her military ID up between two fingers and said loud enough for every officer in the room, "Thank you for your service." It wasn't gratitude. It was mockery dressed in uniform. A couple of the others chuckled the way men do when cruelties become routine. They booked her on nothing obstruction, non-compliance words they tossed around like spare change. Then they marched her down a narrow hallway and opened a holding cell already crowded with 4 people. All of them were black or brown. All of them carried bruises fresh and fading. A young man with a split lip, a woman nursing a swollen wrist, and in the corner an older man whose gray hair couldn't hide the welt on his temple. When Alexis stepped inside, the old man looked up. His eyes carried years of this. He said soft enough for only her and maybe the Lord to hear, "You're not the first. Here we're just targets." Alexis didn't argue. She'd seen battlefields where enemies wore uniforms, and now she was standing in one where they wore badges. She sat on the bench wrist marked red from the cuffs and let the weight of his words settle. From where I stood in the visitors' corridor, I could see things they didn't bother to hide. A camera in the corner, the little red light dark. An officer flipping a folder closed the moment anyone walked by. 2 men trading evidence bags with the casualness of passing salt at dinner. It was a theater of order masking chaos, and Alexis, with her soldier's eyes, cataloged every movement. Cole strutted past the bars once more, tapping the metal with his knuckle. He didn't need words this time. The sneer on his face was enough. Then he was gone, leaving the hum of lights and the shuffle of restless prisoners. Minutes stretched. The other detainees spoke in murmurs, trading stories of stops without reason of fines that grew into charges of nights that turned into weeks because nobody cared to ask why. Alexis listened. She had the posture of someone storing every detail because survival wasn't just about living, it was about remembering. Then like a shadow, Miller appeared. He looked around, first making sure Cole wasn't near. He slipped a paper cup of water through the bars. His hands trembled, but his voice quiet as it was held steady. "Ma'am, you've got to stay strong. I'll find a way to get word out." Alexis studied him for a beat. She didn't smile, there wasn't room for that, but she dipped her chin in acknowledgement. For the first time since the cruiser's lights flashed, a flicker of hope crossed her face. Miller hurried away, shoulders hunched, already bracing for the blowback he knew would come. The cell went quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Not lighter, just less absolute. I stayed at that glass until my legs ached. Watching Alexis in that cage, I understood something ugly. Freedom in Brookhaven wasn't about laws written in books. It was about who held the keys and who they decided deserved to be locked away. But watching Miller slip her that cup of water, hearing his whisper, I also saw a crack in the wall. A small one, but sometimes that's all it takes for light to get in. I remember the first person who didn't just watch that arrest, she acted. Tasha Green, 35 sharp as a blade, had been Alexis's friend since high school. Life had taken them in different directions, Tasha into law, Alexis into war, but the bond never broke. That morning when Cole shoved Alexis into the cruiser, Tasha was 2 cars back. She had her phone out faster than anyone else. The video she caught wasn't shaky outrage. It was evidence. Clean, clear, undeniable. She didn't shout. She didn't run at the officers. She just pressed record until the door slammed and the lights carried her friend away. Then she hit call, not to the mayor, not to local news, straight to Marcus Reynolds. Reynolds isn't the kind of man you expect to find in a small-town story. 42 FBI jacket more often hanging on the back of his chair than on his shoulders, he'd been running an investigation out of Atlanta for months. He'd been chasing whispers of cartel money, sliding quietly into southern counties looking for a hub no one suspected. Brookhaven was on his map, but it was a gray dot, not confirmed, not urgent, until his phone lit up with Tasha's name. Marcus, she said, breathless, but controlled. They just took Alexis Carter. She's in custody right now. I've got it on video. For a moment, silence, then the scrape of his chair. Carter. He pulled the name like a file from a drawer he hadn't opened in years. Alexis Carter, Major, Army Intelligence. Yes, she just got home. They pulled her over on Pine Street. That's when his voice dropped serious as a locked vault. If they know who she is, she won't walk out of that station alive. See, Alexis hadn't just served. Years back, she'd been in Venezuela in a theater where everything blurred politics, military cartel, cash moving in shadows. Reynolds' team had been sniffing at the edges of the same trail money, moving north, vanishing into towns no one thought twice about. Brookhaven was one of those towns. And Alexis Carter, she was on the ground then. She'd seen names, bank codes, maybe faces. She might not have realized the weight of what she carried, but Reynolds did. He pulled the files, cross-checked the old reports. And there it was, a match between the aliases she'd logged overseas and the shell companies tied to local officials in Georgia. A straight line years long, connecting foreign cartels to domestic corruption. Alexis Carter was the missing link. Reynolds didn't waste another breath. He punched the intercom to his team. Suit up. Brookhaven PD, now. Agents scattered like marbles, grabbing vests, radios, evidence kits. One of them, younger, asked, "Do we have a warrant?" Reynolds was already scribbling signatures on the paperwork. "We've had the case for months. This is the excuse we needed." His jaw tightened. They handed us the key on a silver platter when they put cuffs on her. Tasha stayed on the line, pacing the sidewalk as neighbors muttered around her. She looked calm, she told him. But Cole, he said things, ugly things, and the rookie Miller, he... "Stay safe," Reynolds cut in. "Don't get close, we're on our way." I wasn't in that room, but I can picture it, the low thud of boots on linoleum radios, spitting coordinates, black SUVs rolling out of the garage. Reynolds checking his watch, calculating the gap. 30 minutes. That's all they had before Alexis disappeared into the system. Files, doctored cameras erased her name, scrubbed like so many others. He leaned over the map, tacked to the wall, Brookhaven at the center, pins running like veins to other counties. "They think they're holding a soldier," he told his team. "What they don't know is they're sitting on the witness who can crack the whole thing wide open." That was the pivot. A traffic stop that should have been another bitter headline turned into the fuse on a federal investigation. Alexis Carter, cuffed and humiliated, had become the spark Reynolds had been waiting for. And the clock was ticking. Under the stale light of his office, Chief Walter Briggs sat stiff in his chair as Cole finished his report. When the name Alexis Carter slipped from Cole's mouth, Briggs's face turned the color of ash. He shoved back, hard sweat collecting at his temple. "Erase everything," he snapped. "Logs, cameras, clean it all. And if she talks," his voice dropped into a growl, "make sure she never gets the chance." The words hadn't finished echoing when the sound came a pounding at the front doors, heavy and final. "Federal agents, don't move." The command ripped through the station like a thunderclap. Boots hit the tile. Radios crackled, and a wave of FBI jackets poured inside. Their voices overlapped, hands visible. "Step away from the desk." Briggs staggered to his feet, fury returning to cover his fear. "This is a local matter. You have no authority here." Then the crowd parted. Marcus Reynolds stepped forward, calm and deliberate. His badge flashed under the harsh light, a folder in his hand. "Walter Briggs," he said, voice carrying like a gavel, "you are under federal investigation. Charges include civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, corruption, and conspiracy with international cartels. Place your hands behind your back." The list rolled out like a verdict. Briggs tried to roar back, "This is my station," but his words fell flat against the sight of his own officers lowering their hands. Some obeyed, some froze. And Cole, he reached for his weapon. He never got the chance. 2 agents closed in, twisting his arm down, the gun clattering across the floor. Cole cursed, bucking like a man drowning, until cuffs locked around his wrists and a knee pinned him to the tile. Down the hall, Alexis heard it, the pounding boots, the order shouted. She rose from the bench just as Miller appeared, keys trembling in his hand. He leaned close, whispering fast, "Ma'am, hold still." The cuffs clicked open. Alexis flexed her raw wrist, then straightened her back. Reynolds himself pushed through the cell door. He didn't see a detainee. He saw a soldier. "Major Carter," he said, using her rank with purpose. "You're free." She didn't stumble. She didn't plead. She walked out. Steady, passing Cole pinned to the ground, passing Briggs as agents forced his hands behind his back. Every eye followed her. By the time Alexis reached the lobby, cameras were already rolling. Neighbors held up phones. Reporters leaned forward, light bouncing off her bruised cheek and split lip. She didn't smile or wave. She simply stood, tall, the image of dignity reclaimed. Then Briggs came through the same doors, wristbound, dragged past flashing bulbs. The reversal was complete. For Brookhaven, it was like the air itself shifted. People clapped, some wept. And from the crowd, Evelyn Carter's trembling voice carried, "That's my daughter." In that moment, the humiliation of Pine Street was rewritten. Alexis Carter was no longer just the veteran cuffed on a sidewalk. She was the woman who stood unbroken while the system that tried to crush her began to crumble. It wasn't the end, not yet. But for one powerful instant, justice felt real, and everyone who saw it knew Brookhaven would never be the same. They kept us behind sawhorses on the front steps while the agents turned the building inside out. The station that had always felt like a wall was suddenly a hive. Evidence boxes rolled past. Radios popped with clipped confirmations. An agent taped a paper to the glass door federal control notice, and for the first time in a long time, people in Brookhaven saw uniforms that didn't belong to the same old club. Reporters arrived like thunder after lightning. Vans bumped up to the curb. Tripods sprouted. A boom mic floated over the crowd, searching for grief or fury it could catch. Neighbors pressed in, some in work boots, some in Sunday shirts, even though it was a weekday. The heat rose off the concrete and carried the smell of coffee and nerves. Reynolds came out first, jaw set, speaking low to a woman with a clipboard who never stopped writing. He scanned the street the way someone does when he has learned the hard way that danger wears a friendly face. Then he lifted a hand, just a small motion, and agents parted around Alexis like water around a keel. She stepped into the light without flinching. No cuffs now, no hands on her elbows. The bruise on her cheek had bloomed darker, but her back was straight. People started clapping before they meant to, the sound small at first, then gathering its own courage. A few shouted her name. A few just cried louder than they wanted to. The cameras pivoted in one clean motion and locked on her. A gap opened in the crowd, and Evelyn Carter pushed through it like grief can make room where nothing else will. "Lexi," she called, voice breaking on the second syllable. Reynolds took a half step aside, and mother found daughter. There wasn't a speech, just the kind of hug that says, "I counted the days, and I counted the nights, and I counted the breaths." When Evelyn pulled back, her hand touched the bruise like a prayer, and then she turned small as she is to face the wall of lenses. "My daughter bled for this country," she said, the tremor in her voice sharpening into a point. "What gives you the right to shame her?" It wasn't a question for any one person. It was a question for a whole way of doing things. The line traveled down the block and landed on people who thought they had nothing to do with it. A reporter tried to follow with another question, quick and hungry, but Tasha Green had already stepped up to the microphones a city clerk had dragged out and abandoned. She didn't wait for the stand to be adjusted. She took it as it was, and she took the moment. "Brookhaven has been treading on justice for too long," Tasha said. "No theatrics, no shouting, just a lawyer's cadence and a friend's anger. Today the truth starts to breathe in this town. We will not let it suffocate again." She tilted her phone toward the media line. "You asked for proof, I have proof." She held up the clip she filmed that morning. "You asked for names, we have names, and you will have questions for every official who signed off on the culture that let this happen." The crowd shifted. People who had come to watch began to participate, nodding, murmuring assent, adding their own sentences under their breath. It wasn't chaos. It was a choir warming up. Reynolds raised a palm for a moment of air. "No more questions right now," he said, measured. "We will be making formal statements once the scene is secure. This is still a live investigation." He didn't shout. The authority was in the way he did not apologize for having it. Behind him, agents carried out labeled bins, internal affairs, logs, evidence room, seals, intact body cam, drives. The labels read like an inventory of a house that finally admitted it was on fire. Beside me, Patricia Henson dabbed her eyes with a tissue and whispered, "I never thought I'd see it." She wasn't talking about the raid. She was talking about a mother looking the town in the face and refusing to bow. A few feet away, a young man in a construction vest lifted his chin and said, "We're with you, Miss Carter," and others answered without planning to. The words weren't choreographed. They just arrived. Not everyone was pleased. A pair of men in button-downs lingered at the edge of the sidewalk, hands on hips, wearing the look of people calculating what this would cost them. One shook his head when Tasha said truth. Another filmed the crowd instead of the station. You learn to notice who points the camera where. Through the glass for a quick second, I saw Chief Briggs in the hallway, wristbound. face gone the color of bad milk. Agents turned him and walked him toward a side door to avoid the crush out front, but a murmur still chased his shadow down the corridor. The kind towns remember when they talk about reckoning. A boom mic dipped again. Major Carter, a reporter called respectful but relentless. Do you have a message for Brookhaven? Alexis didn't step to the mics. She glanced at Tasha, then at her mother, then at Reynolds, and finally at us, the slow river of neighbors holding the line of the day. Not a speech, she said, voice, steady, carrying without strain. Just this, treat people the way you promised them you will. And when you forget, fix it. She wasn't performing. She was offering a baseline. Reynolds touched her elbow, the smallest cue, and the agents began to angle her toward a waiting SUV. He knew what I think we all felt: a victory on the front steps can paint a target on a back road. He leaned in, and I heard him clearly because the street had learned to listen. We've watched this place a long time, he told her. You gave us the lawful reason to act. We won't waste it. The microphones turned back to Tasha. What comes next? A reporter asked. Depositions, she said. Hearings. Answers about budgets, seizures, traffic stops, and who benefited. And patience. Justice is fast today because it had a long time to wait. Behind the barricade, a chant started. Soft, almost embarrassed at first. Do the right thing. It wasn't slick. It wasn't angry. It sounded like neighbors reminding each other who they intended to be. The phrase found a rhythm and picked up claps. Even the kids on scooters tapped along, not sure what they were tapping for, but sure they were supposed to. As the SUVs pulled away, Tasha squeezed Evelyn's hand and stayed with her. Alexis looked back once through the tinted glass. Not a wave, just a nod that said, I see you. I hear you, hold this with me. The vehicle turned the corner and the crowd exhaled again. On the steps, Reynolds paused. He spoke into his radio, but his eyes were on the street. Lock down all logs, he said. Chain of custody tight. And no leaks. Not one. It didn't sound like paranoia. It sounded like experience. By noon, the heat had sharpened. The press had angled for shade, and the first official statement hit our phones. The FBI confirmed the raid and the charges. It confirmed that community members should come forward with information. It confirmed, without saying it outright, that the story wasn't finished. The anger that had started on Pine Street didn't burn out. It turned. It settled into something steadier, the kind of fuel that lasts through a long night. People stopped whispering and started signing their names to what they believed. We had watched a woman stand back up in the same building that tried to fold her. We had watched a mother raise her voice, and it didn't crack. We had watched a friend step to a microphone and make truth sound like a task list. It was no parade. No one pretended we had crossed a finish line. But when the sawhorses finally came down and the reporters chased their deadlines, Brookhaven didn't go quiet the way it used to. The voices didn't scatter. They held. And you could feel it. Justice hadn't won the day, not yet, but it had taken a step onto the field and refused to step back. The raid should have ended it, but by nightfall it was clear Brookhaven wasn't done bleeding. Inside the evidence room, agents opened a locked drawer no one claimed to own. What they pulled out wasn't drugs or cash. It was worse. A black binder, thick and heavy pages filled with names. At the top, veterans high risk. Every one of them was black or brown. Some had notes beside their names: traffic stop, ready pending charges, watch family. And near the bottom, newly inked, was Alexis Carter. Reynolds slammed the binder shut like it burned. His jaw tightened. You see it now, he told us, voice low. They target veterans because they know you are respected. People listen to you. And if they silence the ones the community trusts, the whole town goes quiet. That truth hung heavier than the heat. Alexis didn't react outwardly, but I saw her hand ball into a fist at her side. 20 years of fighting enemies overseas only to find her name on a hit list at home. By night, the FBI moved Alexis, Evelyn, and Tasha to a safe house on the edge of town, a plain two-story with curtains too clean, a driveway too empty. It wasn't meant to be permanent, just a pause until the investigation spread wider. The agents posted guards, checked locks, and swore the place was tight. But evil doesn't wait. It was near midnight when the first bottle hit. Glass shattered against the porch, flames licking across the railing. A second followed, then a third. Shadows moved in the tree line, men not boys, coordinated. The kind who knew how to breach, how to scatter. Inside, Evelyn jolted awake with a cry. Alexis was already on her feet, voice sharp but steady. Safe room, now. She grabbed her mother's arm, pushed Tasha ahead, her body blocking the stairwell as another window broke downstairs. The smell of gasoline clawed up the walls. They reached the reinforced room at the back. Alexis shoved them inside, turned the lock, then spun back toward the hall. She wasn't built to cower. She slipped into soldier mode, hands searching the walls, eyes mapping exits, every muscle remembering. She found a fireplace poker, braced herself, and waited. The door downstairs groaned. Footsteps stormed in. One voice cursed, another laughed. A crash in the kitchen, then boots on the stairs. Alexis stayed low heartbeat, steadying body angled to strike. The first man rounded the corner, massed a bat in his grip. She swung, catching his wrist steel on bone. He howled, dropping the bat. She drove him backward into the wall, eyes blazing. But there were more. 2, maybe 3. She couldn't hold forever. And then the blast of sirens, the slam of heavier boots. The FBI had doubled back. Reynolds himself shoved through the door with agents on his shoulders. The intruders scattered like roaches in light, vanishing into the night, leaving smoke and broken glass. When the last flame was stamped out, Reynolds pulled Alexis aside. His face was carved from stone. "We've got a leak," he said. "Only a handful of us knew this location. That means someone inside is feeding them." The words stung worse than the smoke. If the FBI couldn't be trusted, who could? The night wasn't done taking. An urgent call crackled over Reynolds' radio. "Officer down. Possible ambush." His face fell as the name came through. Miller. The rookie who had slipped Alexis water, who had whispered hope through steel bars. He'd been cornered, leaving his apartment. They beat him until bones broke, left him bleeding on the asphalt. By the time agents found him, he was barely conscious. At the hospital, doctors said the word critical. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, touch and go. Reynolds didn't hide the truth. He's the one who tipped us off about Carter's arrest. He risked everything to get that call out, and they found him for it. I saw Alexis close her eyes, then not to weep, but to contain the fury. For every step forward, the enemy was clawing back. The raid was only the opening blow. The war in Brookhaven was far from finished. And standing in that smoke-stained house, watching stretchers roll through hospital doors, we all felt it. The danger wasn't over. It was only beginning. Hospitals have a way of flattening time. The clocks keep moving, but the minutes feel like they lie down and refuse. By the time I reached County General, the night crew had settled in bleach on the air, coffee burning in a pot. No one bothered to clean a TV in the corner, whispering the late news about a town that suddenly mattered. Alexis arrived without fanfare, cap pulled low, a bruise fading along her cheek. Tasha was with her, steady as a metronome. 2 agents stood outside, the ICU wing jackets off, but presence unmistakable. One nodded them through. I kept to the waiting room, close enough to witness, far enough not to intrude. Through the glass, I could see the doorway to Ryan Miller's room, a red line on the floor and a sign about visitors. Alexis paused there like a soldier at a threshold. She went in alone. I didn't hear the first words, but I saw the way she took his hand, careful, like touching a bird. Miller looked small under the tubes and tape face swollen where men had made their point with fists. When the monitor steadied, his mouth moved. Later, Alexis told me what he said, but you could read it in the soft set of her shoulders as he whispered, "At least I did one thing right. No hero speech, no dramatic music. Just a young cop who'd decided which side of the line he wanted to stand on and paid the tax for it." Alexis squeezed his hand. "You did more than one," she said. "You started something." A nurse cleared her throat gently, and Alexis stepped back so machines could do the work people couldn't. She stood a moment longer, eyes on the rise and fall of his chest, then slipped out. In the hall, Marcus Reynolds waited with the look of a man who'd slept in his tie. "We push now," he told them. No pauses. Push meant paperwork with teeth. That morning, the Bureau widened the circle subpoenas to banks that thought they were anonymous warrants for servers that hummed quietly in strip malls, interviews with clerks who suddenly remembered where forms were misfiled. A task force stood up in Atlanta. The state attorney general called it a coordinated effort. It sounded clean in the press release. It felt messier up close, agents pinning string to maps, accountants reading numb columns. Like Scripture, Reynolds triangulating lies with the patience of a man who has been lied to before. Brookhaven didn't sit at the center of the web by accident. Money had been moving through shell companies that looked like lawn services and consulting firms. Each had a P.O. box. Each owed favors. When Reynolds' team laid the ledger against the blacklist pulled from the station, patterns emerged like ink under heat stops timed before court dates, fines that multiplied into forfeitures, assets that drifted into auctions and came out in the hands of friends. If you weren't looking for it, you'd call it coincidence. If you were, you called it a plan. This is where Alexis became more than a victim in a headline. In a conference room that still smelled like printer toner, she sat with a legal pad in the kind of memory you develop when names can keep your teammates alive. She marked aliases she'd seen in Venezuela handles, call signs the stray half-phrases men use when they think the wind will carry them away. Reynolds slid her a list of Georgia LLCs. She slid it back with marks. This one lines up with a shipper in Caracas. This bank code echoes a note from 19. Different spelling, same owner. No drama, just accumulation. She didn't posture. She pointed. The board on the wall began to look like something you could prosecute. Meanwhile, Tasha did what towns need when the air grows thin. She spoke where microphones gather and in the record starts. The council held an emergency session in the high school auditorium because the chambers were too small for what people had to say. Folding chairs rattled. A judge sat 2 rows back with his jaw clenched, trying to look like a citizen. Tasha wore a plain suit and no patience. Brookhaven doesn't have a public relations problem, she said, voice carrying to the rafters. We have a moral one. I will submit sworn statements in body cam gaps and a list of cases tied to officers now under federal arrest. I am asking today for 3 things: an independent auditor for fines and forfeitures, a full release of internal affairs, complaints, and a stop to pretext traffic stops until the review is complete. She turned to the table where council members stared like students. If you refuse on the record, so your grandchildren can read it. They didn't refuse. They didn't cheer either. They voted to schedule a vote the way officials buy time. But the room stood when she finished, and not just the room, something in the town stood up too. Back at the hospital, we settled into that strange rhythm cities know after a storm. Neighbors brought food the ICU wouldn't allow and left it anyway. Evelyn pressed a note into the nurse's palm for the young officer when he wakes, and the nurse tucked it inside a drawer with the care usually reserved for medicine. On the TV, anchors learned to pronounce our street names. Strangers sent prayers from towns that had been here before. Reynolds didn't pretend the leak had vanished. He narrowed the circle until it could fit it in one hand, then closed that hand. Phones were audited. Access logs were read aloud. Agents were rotated and reminded that secrets live or die on the small decision a person makes at a hallway door. He told Alexis plainly, trust is currency. Spend it slow. One afternoon between depositions, Alexis stood at the window of that same conference room and watched a storm roll over the water tower. I keep hearing boots, she said softly, not to anyone in particular. Even when it's just rain, no one offered a cure. Tasha joined her at the glass. You don't have to be okay today, she said. Just be honest. It wasn't advice so much as permission. News traveled fast in those weeks. The state task force announced its reach would include 2 counties over. A grand jury impaneled in Atlanta asked for records with dates that reached back to when we still believed the barber pole would spin forever. The first lower-level plea deals came in officers who didn't want to be the last ones standing when the lights came up. They traded text threads for lighter charges. Those messages read like a confession written in fragments. Pull her Friday judge will clear check with W names reduced to initials, because men who think they're careful always underestimate the alphabet. Through it all, Alexis kept showing up. She didn't turn into a symbol for the cameras, though the cameras tried. She turned into a witness. She said what she saw, what she remembered, what she could prove. When a junior agent misread a code she recognized from a field report, she corrected him without heat. When an attorney tested her on cross in a preliminary hearing, she met each question with the precision of someone who understands that answers are bricks and walls are built one at a time. The night Miller squeezed her fingers for the first time since the attack. He tried to apologize. I should have done more, he rasped. Alexis shook her head. You did the thing that mattered when it mattered. He nodded, once eyes glassy, and let the monitor speak for him. Hope didn't arrive with trumpets. It came like a pilot light catching small blue shore. You could feel it in town hall when folks lined up to speak and found their voices didn't shake as much. You could see it in the hospital cafeteria when construction workers and teachers shared a table like they were planning something instead of waiting for it. You could hear it in the way sirens sounded different, less like warning, more like work. A reporter asked me because I'm old enough to look like I remember things if Brookhaven felt changed. I told her the truth I could manage. It feels like we stopped pretending not to see. She wrote that down like a quote. I meant it like a prayer. On the day the task force served papers at the county building, Reynolds passed me in the hallway outside the conference room. He didn't break stride. "We're not finished," he said. "We know." I answered. He glanced toward the closed door where Alexis was testifying again, and his voice softened. "But we're closer." That was the mood of it, closer, not fixed, not healed, not forgiven, just closer to a version of the town where a mother's voice could carry and a rookie's courage counted, and a veteran didn't have to stand alone on a sidewalk to teach us what law should feel like. Evenings came earlier as summer leaned into fall. Porch lights clicked on up and down Sycamore. People lingered outside a little longer, talking low, comparing notes, deciding quietly practically what they would demand next. In the distance, the water tower threw back the last of the sun. For the first time in months, I believed it the night would come, but so would morning, and when it did, more of us would be ready. A year can pass like a page turning, but in Brookhaven, every line of that page was written in sweat. By the time summer circled back, the town looked different, not healed, not whole, but different. And on a bright morning with flags lifting in the breeze and folding chairs lined across the courthouse lawn, Alexis Carter walked to a podium, wearing a uniform no one had expected, the badge and bars of the interim police chief of Brookhaven. The crowd rose. Some clapped, some cried, and some just stared, unsure how to place this new chapter. In the first row sat Evelyn Carter, her small frame wrapped in a shawl, eyes wet but steady. She had lived long enough to bury friends, neighbors, and hope itself more than once. But this time she lifted her chin. Beside her, Tasha Green stood with arms crossed, pride in her gaze, as if willing the town to hear every syllable her friend would speak. Alexis leaned into the microphone, voice even carrying across the lawn without needing to rise. "We used to think battlefields were oceans away," she began. "But some of us learned the truth the hard way. The fight for justice isn't just in foreign lands. It's here, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, in the way we treat each other when no one is watching. And hear me clearly, justice does not stay silent." The words landed like stones in water ripples moving outward. Parents nodded. Teachers wept quietly. A few officers in crisp new uniforms shifted their weight as if deciding whether the badge on their chest could live up to the weight she was giving it. Later that week, I walked Sycamore and saw changes you could touch. Patrol cars rolled slower, windows down. Officers chatting with kids instead of glaring. Training academies had opened their doors wider. Screening, harder teaching, longer drilling, not just tactics, but community service. In the East End, storefronts in the Black District showed fresh paint, federal grants investing where fines used to drain. The laughter of children had found its way back to corners that once echoed with sirens. And yet, even in sunlight, shadows lingered. At the swearing in, Alexis's eyes swept the crowd, pausing when she caught a familiar face, a state politician grinning wide, shaking hands like seeds into soil. To most, he was just another guest. But Alexis remembered his name scribbled on ledgers, whispered in code. He had slipped through nets before, and now he stood close enough to clap her on the back. That night, when the speeches were over and the chairs stacked away, Alexis returned to her office. The desk was still new wood polished to a shine, but waiting on top was something that didn't belong. A plain envelope, no return, no seal. Inside, one sentence scrawled in black ink. "We're not finished." She read it once, twice, and set it flat on the desk. For a long moment, she stared at the window at the town she'd promised to guard. The hum of a street light buzzed against the glass. When she finally looked back, the cameras caught it, eyes cold steady, refusing to flinch. That was how the story closed, not with a parade, not with peace, but with a reminder. Justice had found a foothold in Brookhaven, but the ground beneath it was still shifting. And the fight, Alexis knew, wasn't over. For us, watching it was both relief and unease. We saw a community rise. We saw a mother's faith honored. We saw a veteran stand taller than the men who tried to break her. But we also saw what she saw, the smile of a politician who had survived the purge, the letter that promised another round. The screen froze on her gaze, unyielding, unafraid. A look that said, if the battle comes again, I will be ready. And the story left us there, holding our breath, knowing the war for justice never truly ends. And that's where we'll leave Alexis's journey for now. Her story reminds us that courage isn't just about battlefields overseas. It's about standing tall in our own communities, refusing to let silence bury the truth. It shows that justice may be delayed, but when people rise together, it can never be denied. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who believes in the power of justice, and don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Max Stories for more powerful tales that shine a light where others look away. Your support means more than numbers. It's the heartbeat that gives our team the strength to keep creating stories that matter. Remember this at Mr. Max Stories, every story is more than entertainment. It's a stand for dignity, courage, and truth. That's our mark, and we carry it with pride.